Lessons about joy, patience, and the dangers of selfishness. Ryan DeFreitas is a secret agent with a whole lot to learn, and he insists on working alone until he's paired with a very unlikely partner.
Mommy!
Ryan DeFreitas' Secret Agent, episodes 4, 5, and 6 from American Family Studios are available now at afastore.net.
I'm really at a point where we're getting very close to having the cabinet and other things that I want. I've worked with Mike Pompeo now for quite some time. We're always on the same wavelength. Rex and I have been talking about this for a long time. We got along actually quite well, but we disagreed on things. When you look at the Iran deal, I think it's terrible. I guess it was okay.
When I have a see-through wall, sir, I know what's approaching the border before it approaches.
You have to know what's on the other side of the wall. California's sanctuary policies put the entire nation at risk. They're the best friend of the criminal. Congress must fund the border wall.
The renowned physicist Stephen Hawking has labeled himself as an atheist, clearly stating that he doesn't believe God exists at all.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome to Focal Point on American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio. I'm Brian Fisher, the genial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent host, coming to you with our complete team. We got Jeff Reed as producer, Rob Gardner as our broadcast engineer, and Kelly, our intern. Interning with us for a few weeks. We may not let her go. She's planning to go off to college this fall, but she forgot the fact that she's got to get permission from the Focal Point crew. I mean, once you become a part of this crew, you can't leave without our permission. So she's got some decisions that she's going to have to make here. Anyway, welcome aboard the Focal Point bus and into the conversation. Great to have you along with us. A lot we're going to get to today. These nominations, Pompeo. The woman, Gina Haspel, she's a supporter of waterboarding. That's going to be an absolutely monstrous issue in her confirmation hearings. It's going to be huge. So we're going to get you prepped for that. I do not want you to believe any lies about waterboarding. And you're going to hear nothing but lies from the talking snake media about waterboarding. Nothing but lies about waterboarding from the talking snake media. So I want to give you information to set your mind at ease on that. Now, in our reading in the Word, we are in 2 Samuel, chapter 16, beginning in verse 15 and going through the end of chapter 17. And this is where Absalom completes his coup d'etat. David has left. You remember, he had to leave Jerusalem walking barefoot, dust on his head, wearing a hoodie, and had to tramp to the other side of the Jordan River with his ragtag band of people that stuck with him. Absalom, who had launched this coup successfully now, enters Jerusalem to take over. And then this guy's named Hushai the Archite, verse 16, Hushai the Archite. This is the guy that went to David and said, look, I want to go with you. My loyalty is to you. I want to go with you. And David said, no, what I need you to do is I need you to go back to Jerusalem. I need you to go to Absalom, and I need you to pretend to be his friend so that you can narc him out. You can let me know what he's up to so you can keep me abreast of what he's doing. So Hushai, the Archite, goes to Absalom, says, long live the king. Absalom is suspicious because he knew of his connection to his father David. Is this your loyalty to your friend? Why did you not go with your friend? That is, with David. Hushai said to Absalom, no, for whom the Lord and this people and all the men of Israel have chosen, his I will be, and with him I will remain. As I have served your father, so I will serve you. Now, by the way, we're not going to take time to deal with this, but I want you to think about this for a bit. But Hushai here is telling a bald-faced lie to Absalom. And yet what he does here is a good thing. by telling this lie, he's able to keep himself in a position where he can protect God's anointed. Now, the point here is that lying to evil people to protect good people is not a sin. Lying to evil people to protect the innocent is not a sin. Lying to the guilty to protect the innocent is not a sin. So Hushai lies to Absalom, convinces him to keep him around, and so he does. Then Absalom had a decision to make. He brings in Ahithophel, asks Ahithophel, who was everybody's counsel. He was David's trusted counselor. What we're told in verse 23, in those days the counsel that Ahithophel gave was as if one consulted the word of God. So everybody looked at Ahithophel as the counselor par excellence. They took his word as if it were the word of God. So Ahithophel gives Absalom advice, and he takes it and acts on it. Then there's another decision that has to be made, and this is what to do about David, who's on the run. So Absalom says to Ahithophel, what should I do? And Ahithophel says, what you need to do is give me 12,000 men. I will arise, and I will pursue David, and I will take him out. So that's the first bit of counsel. Then Absalom turns to Hushai the Archite and says, what do you think I should do? And Hushai the Archite says, I think you ought to gather all the people of Israel, and I think you ought to go in mass and surround David and besiege him and take him out. And so Absalom says, look, I like your counsel better than I like the counsel of Ahithophel. And the reason was, we're told in verse 14, for the Lord had ordained to defeat the good counsel of Ahithophel, so that the Lord might bring harm upon Absalom. So in other words, Ahithophel's advice was the best advice. And if Absalom had followed it, he would have been successful. Hushai's advice was bad advice. It made it possible for David to escape. So Hushai, by frustrating the counsel of Ahithophel, by offering a persuasive counter-counsel, which Absalom took, saved the life of David. So Hushai, in his role as kind of the spy of the court, was able to protect and save David's life. And here's what happened to Ahithophel, verse 23. When he saw that his counsel was not followed, he saddled his donkey and went off home to his own city. He set his house in order and hanged himself. Now, there's a lesson here about life. I mean, here's Ahithophel. His life is so wrapped up in his career. It's so wrapped up in being successful at what he was known for that he could not handle failure. He was so dependent for his sense of worth and purpose on success that he took his own life when his counsel was rejected. So it's a lesson to us to keep things in balance. We also see that Hushai was the one that frustrated the counsel of Ahithophel in answer to David's prayer. What I want to point out here, David prays to God to frustrate the counsel of Ahithophel. And how does the prayer get answered? It gets answered by Hushai showing up. In other words, realize that God answers prayer most often through people. Doesn't answer it by some bolt of lightning from the sky. He'll move in somebody's heart to do what is necessary to answer your prayer. So a lot of times that'll happen. You'll pray something, and the way the prayer gets answered, if you think about it, will be through somebody, some person who is the hands and feet of Jesus to answer your prayer, responding to the nudges and the promptings of God. Now, the other thing that opens up for us, if we listen to God and listen to his promptings, you and I may be people who become those through whom God works to answer the prayers of other people. And I remember one time when I was pastoring, I had a woman that was a guest in our church that day. I hadn't met her before. I just approached her after the church. I tried to meet the guests and visitors and chatted with her and spent a few minutes praying with her. And I found out later from her that she was determined that if she went to church that day, she was a very lonely woman. She went to church that day and nobody greeted her. She was going to go home and kill herself. And she was on the way out the door when something prompted me to initiate the conversation with her. It literally saved her life. That was just God using somebody to answer her prayer to save her life. Well, let's go to prayer. Lord, as we read this story, we are reminded of your power and your ability to carry out your will through willing individuals. Reminds us that you carry out your will not apart from us, but through us. I pray that you may use us to answer someone else's prayer. I pray, Lord, that we will take caution from Ahithophel's example, who depended upon his success for his sense of worth. Protect us from having so much wrapped up in success that we cannot handle failure. Amen.
You shall not murder. Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. This is the 6th commandment of the 10 commandments. You shall not murder. We are asking schools all over America to put this on their marquees, put this on their signs out in front of their school for 1 week to remind America's students that innocent life is precious. Help us spread the word about this campaign to your friends and family. Please go to our website, afa.net, and sign our open letter to America's schools. We need to proclaim this message, you shall not murder, across the land. Why? Because gun control alone will not solve matters of the heart. We need our young people to understand that murder is a violation of God's law, and also it's a violation of the laws all across this land. So help us. Go to afa.net and spread the word.
I have said these things to you that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart. I have overcome the world. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Corner. It's amazing to me. Paul addressed the fact that some would preach Christ out of selfish ambition in Philippians chapter 1. There really is nothing new under the sun. Just because something is new to us doesn't make it a new thing. The times, the attendant darkness we are facing now, and what we will face in the future may be new to us, but they are not new to God. The Lord gave us his word that in him we might have peace. He told us that difficult times would come, but he also said, take heart, because he had overcome the world. And if God be for us, who can be against us?
Visit the Hamilton Corner on the podcast page at afr.net for more from Abraham Hamilton III, public policy analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Great to have you in the conversation. Let's jump to some content here. I think where I want to start, let's just jump right into what's going on in D.C. with Donald Trump. Fired Rex Tillerson, replaced him with Mike Pompeo as the Secretary of State, and has promoted Gina Haspel to be the new CIA director, the first CIA director in the history of the agency, and everybody wants to talk about how anti-woman Trump is. So catch this. He's supposed to be this guy that hates women. He's a misogynist. He's terrible. And now he's the guy that promotes the first woman who's ever headed up the CIA in the history of the agency. By the way, we got some sound bites we're going to get into about this as soon as I can find. There's my rundown. But this is an interesting story to me. This is a little bit off topic, but it'll get us into it. You know, they have trained Navy medics, and they're trained to go to the field of battle, and they're trained to deal with battle wounds on the field, serious injuries on the field. My dad was a medic in World War II. I've told you that. He was a conscientious objector because he was Mennonite, didn't want to take up arms and kill anybody, but he served his country by becoming a medic and being a life giver instead of a life taker. And of course, medics, I mean, they got to be around the place where people are getting wounded and shot at. So he put his life on the line, was willing to take the risk in order to serve his country in the interest of freedom. So anyway, they got these Navy medics. They got to train them, and this tells you all you need to know. You don't need to know anything else about the topic I'm going to tell you about other than this little story. This is all you need to know. They have to find a way to train these people in dealing with combat wounds. So you know what they do? They give them a tour of duty in Chicago.
Oh, wow.
It's the only place they can find where they encounter enough people with enough serious gun wounds that their medics can actually get trained in treating the kind of wounds that they are going to encounter on the battlefield. Now, this is Chicago, a city that's been run by Democrats for decades, got the strictest gun control laws in the universe, and that's the place where medics go to find out what wounds on the battlefield look like. This is from the Wall Street Journal. He is making a pit stop, talking about a specific Navy hospital corpsman, to quote the president. It's a corpsman. He's making a pit stop at Cook County's Stroger Hospital, which the Navy says is among few places here in the U.S. that provide experience treating the types of wounds they will inevitably see on the battlefield. For so long, the first time a corpsman got any trauma experience was when they were deployed, and some would just freeze up. We don't want that to happen anymore. They got a 14-bed unit there in Stroger Hospital that treats over 6,000 trauma patients every year, many of them with penetrating, life-threatening wounds akin to those on the battlefield. And about 30% of their patients are admitted to the trauma ward with wounds from firearms. You know what the average across the nation is for people admitted to a trauma center with wounds from firearms? 4.2%. 30% of this hospital's patients are dealing with wounds from firearms. And here's what Dr. Farhan Bokhari, he chairs the trauma and burn surgery unit at the hospital. He says the experience here can't be replicated anywhere unless you have a major land invasion. So he says the closest thing you're going to find to the kind of wounds that you see in Chicago is if you're in the middle of a major land invasion. Now, one of the things that happened yesterday, it's still actually, I think, too close to make a final, absolute final call, but this election in Pennsylvania's 18th district, and we're going to talk to Patrick Howley about this in the second hour. I'll get a little bit of information on it. We'll pick his brain about it. He's with Big League Politics, and they've done some work on this race. But it was a very tight race. The Republican candidate, Rick Saccone, not an exciting candidate, kind of a vanilla guy, had a tough time raising money, didn't have much of a campaign organization. The national GOP organization flew in to try to give him some help with money, resources. Donald Trump flew down there, had that wild rally down there on Saturday night. We played some sound bites from that. Everybody pumped up by Donald Trump, but not so much for Rick Saccone. And his challenger, Conor Lamb, who, listen to this, is a pro-life, pro-gun, anti-Pelosi Democrat, which is interesting to me because when people run for office, they have to try to sound as conservative as they can possibly be because they know the instinct of the American people is for conservatism. So Conor Lamb's campaigning as a pro-life guy, campaigning as an anti-Pelosi guy, says we need a change in leadership, and campaigning as a pro-gun guy. And he's got 600 more votes now, roughly, than Rick Saccone does. So it's probably going to be a recount. Rick Saccone hasn't conceded yet. This guy has claimed victory, but he has not. But Rick Saccone has not yet conceded. Now let's see. Do I have? I think I've got an election soundbite in here somewhere. I forgot to note it. Down probably at the end of the, clip 8. This is Conor Lamb, a clip from Conor Lamb claiming victory. Let's listen to him. Clip 8.
What is it about Nancy Pelosi specifically that you believe makes her unqualified to do the job, or that at least she should go?
Well, it's nothing personal. I just think that the leadership of both parties have presided over a time when we've had more and more gridlock and fewer important things getting done. And I always learn that responsibility starts at the top. So I think we need to sweep some new people in there.
All right, so Conor Lamb needs some turnover at the top, both parties. But I'm running against Nancy Pelosi. So this is interesting. You got a guy that wins, apparently, or could be, wins a Democratic race by running against the leader of his own party. So that shows you how much disaffection there is out there for Nancy Pelosi. He had no hesitation about making an issue out of the fact that he did not support her, thought that she ought to be replaced as the minority leader in the House of Representatives. So that's an interesting dimension here. Now, let's talk about Stephen Hawking just for a second. Let's go to clip R4. You probably heard by now that Stephen Hawking, who was one of the leading scientists in the world, died today at 76. Really an amazing story. I mean, he's an amazing story, basically, of fortitude and courage and perseverance. He was diagnosed with ALS, with Lou Gehrig disease, basically at about age 21 or 22. The average lifespan of somebody who is diagnosed with Lou Gehrig disease is 3 to 5 years. He lived until he was 76. And you know, you see pictures of him over time, and he just kind of shrivels up. You can just kind of see him shrink in his own body till there's virtually nothing left but a wispy shell of a man. But he died today at 76. And I'm looking at a piece from a website called CNET talking about Stephen Hawking. And the title of the piece, he makes it clear that there is no God. Well, let me mention this story first. He left a final message for us. He believes that we have to leave the earth in the next 200 years or we are going to face extinction. So if you don't relocate to the moon or to Jupiter or to Mars or to some interstellar location, the Millennium Falcon or whatever, you will face extinction in the next 200 years.
I think it's pretty safe to say everybody in this studio will be leaving this earth.
Yeah, that's right. If we get to that point, we'll be gone way ahead of this deal. You know, so that's what he says. Humans must leave the earth in the next 200 years if we want to survive. Issued by Professor Stephen Hawking in the months before his deaths today. He believed life on Earth could be wiped out by a disaster such as an asteroid strike or an alien invasion. You know, you get this kind of idea from the scriptures, don't you? 2 Peter 3, the earth is going to be wiped out. It's going to be burned up. You know, and when Christians would talk about it, they would poo-poo, you're just crazy. That's as nutso, fanatical, right-wing Bible thumpers that believe that. Now, here's the leading scientists in the world saying the earth could get wiped out by a disaster in the next 200 years, and you'd better make preparations for it. You've got a short amount of time to get yourself ready for a disaster that could wipe out the entire earth. He also warned that overpopulation was going to be a problem, that human aggression was going to be a problem, and that climate change could cause humanity to self-destruct. Now, here's a scientist that believes the swill and the bilge of global warming. So it's a reminder that even really, really bright people, really, really smart people can be fooled by fake science. He says future generations will need to forge a new life in space. One of his main fears for the planet was global warming. Hawking said that Earth will one day look like the 860-degree Fahrenheit planet Venus. So I would suggest you not, if you're going to relocate from Earth, I wouldn't suggest Venus as the destination. 860 degrees on the surface of Venus. Says we don't do something, we're going to wind up like Venus. He believed that President Donald Trump's decision to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement has doomed our planet. You know, and you hear a lot of people, warmists, that say this, that doomed our planet. Well, you know, my response to that is, okay, well, if our planet is doomed, you know, why should we bother to recycle? Why should we bother to use biofuels? You know, why should we bother to use windmills and hang our clothes out to dry if the earth is doomed? Why not enjoy the planet, enjoy life in the time that we have left? But Stephen Hawking did say, I've made it clear that he believes there is no God. According to CNET, the physicist explains that science now offers more convincing explanations for existence. He is therefore an atheist. He has come out and declared that there is no God. He gave an interview to Spain's El Mundo in which he expressed his firm belief that the earth or the world was the work of scientifically explainable phenomena, not of a supreme being. Before we understand science, it is natural to believe that God created the universe, but now science offers a more convincing explanation. You know, but the reality is he's just simply wrong about science, because science has no answer for the most basic question that exists. The most fundamental question that anybody can ask is this one: why is there something rather than nothing? Science has no answer for that question. We do. Something exists because God brought it into existence. And you talk about the Big Bang. Stephen Hawking believes in the Big Bang, and this explosion of an infinitely dense ball of matter becoming the entire universe. So the question is, okay, where did that incredibly dense ball of matter come from? Science has absolutely no answer for that question. So the two basic questions, why is there something rather than nothing, and where did the stuff that blew up in the Big Bang come from? They got no answers to those basic questions. Be back in 2.
This is Dr. Richard Lamb, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary, and welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. Yesterday, I visited with you about Ruth Graham, Billy Graham's daughter, and her testimony at her father's funeral, and why it had such a particular power as she gave her testimony. She pulled into the driveway of her parents' home after having to leave her second failed marriage, wondering what her parents' reaction would be, and yet when she got out of the car, her dad gave her a great big hug and said, "Welcome home," representing God's unconditional love for his children. I don't think there was a dry eye in the house as we listened to Ruth's story. Ruth's story echoes Jesus' parable of the prodigal son, a biblical story that touches virtually everyone. Why? Because we all want a father like the prodigal's father, who, as the scripture tells us, while the son was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion and ran and threw his arms around his neck and kissed him. The good news of the gospel is that everyone can have a father like that, a heavenly father. Once we trust Jesus as our Savior and his sacrifice on the cross for our sin, then we can always count on his unconditional love and forgiveness. As the Apostle John reminds us, if we confess our sins, he's faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. God wants to be that all-forgiving Father to each and every one of us, but we cannot know him and his forgiveness without first coming to know Jesus as our personal Savior and Lord, by trusting him and his sacrifice on the cross for our sins and asking him to come into our heart. You can experience that forgiveness and that love, if you haven't, by asking Jesus to come into your heart. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher
on American Family Radio.
Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net.
afa.net.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Talking in the last segment about Stephen Hawking, who died apparently not believing in God, believing in science. He believes science has an answer for everything, and therefore he is an atheist, doesn't think, believes science can explain everything, but science, like I mentioned, has no answer for the simplest questions that the universe poses. Why is there a universe? Why is there something instead of nothing? What's the explanation for that? Science has no answer for that question. And you ask them how the world began. Well, it began with the Big Bang. Well, what's the Big Bang? Well, it's this explosion of this incredibly dense little ball of matter, and it just blew up and expanded into the entire universe. Well, where did that incredibly dense ball of matter come from? Stephen Hawking has no answer to that question. Who was that other really smart guy, Richard Dawkins?
Yeah.
If you ever saw the movie Expelled, you ought to see that if you have not seen that. That was a movie that was done by Ben Stein, and he's talking about the fact that college campuses all over the country banned the teaching of intelligent design. That's a scientific theory that the universe shows evidence of design, indicating that there is a designer behind it. It's all science. They don't talk about the Bible ever in intelligent design presentations. I do when I talk about creation, because I have no hesitation doing that, because the best in science confirms what the Bible teaches. Remember, you can have a conflict between good theology and bad science, but it is impossible to have a conflict between good theology and good science. You can have a conflict between bad theology and good science, or good theology and bad science. But if it's good theology and good science, it is not possible for there to be a genuine conflict, because God is the author of both. And remember, the Bible says the fool has said in his heart, what? There is no God. Those are the last 4 words in the heading of this article about Stephen Hawking, the most brilliant guy in the world. The last 4 words, Stephen Hawking makes it clear there is no God. That's right out of the Bible. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. So he was a brilliant, highly intelligent, highly intellectual fool. And now, unfortunately, Stephen Hawking knows the truth about everything. I think the movie that they made about him was A Theory of Everything, or The Theory About Everything.
Yeah.
Something like this. Well, now he's got the answer. Now he's got the true theory about everything. Oh, yeah. Now, speaking of Stephen Hawking, I just wanted you to hear from his own voice. Remember, he had a real difficulty talking just because of the ALS, the Lou Gehrig's disease. And here he is talking to an interviewer. I believe this is
Stephen King.
King.
Larry King.
Larry King.
Yeah.
Man, I'm having trouble with names lately. But his interview with Larry King. And listen very carefully to what he says. Larry King asks him a question. Listen to Hawking's response.
Do you believe in God?
God may exist, but science can explain the universe without the need for a creator.
So God may exist. He says, I don't believe he does. God may exist, said Hawking, but science explains the universe without a need for a creator. And as I mentioned, that is absolutely logically not true. Science can't explain why there's something rather than nothing. Science cannot explain where the dense ball of matter that blew up into the Big Bang came from.
Can I read something out of Romans that reminds me of where it says, because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were they thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. And this was the part, professing themselves to be wise, they became fools.
Okay, professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. So I just want to issue a challenge to anybody that's listening to the sound of my voice right now, and you don't believe in God because you believe in the theory of evolution, you believe science has all the answers. I'm begging you to reconsider that point of view, because believing that has cost Stephen Hawking a place in the eternal kingdom, unless he made a sharp turn at the very end of his life, which can happen. Remember the thief on the cross. He changed positions the last 4 minutes of his life. His family never knew about it. His friends never knew about it. It was just him and Christ that knew that he had become a believer. So who knows what could have happened at the end of Stephen Hawking's life. But I would beg you not to make that same mistake. Don't put it off. Make your decision today that you're going to become a follower of God through Jesus Christ.
One thing we can be certain of, whether he chose Christ or denied him, he knows now.
He knows now. Sure. He's got the answer to all those questions now. All right, well, let's turn to some of these other questions. By the way, Republicans are already blaming Saccone for being a too plain vanilla candidate. We had nothing to do with it. It's all your fault. And this is interesting. We'll talk about this with our guest in the second hour, Patrick Howley. But Paul Ryan has a super PAC, and Paul Ryan sent out mailers to voters in this district in Pennsylvania, making sure they knew that the Democratic candidate, Connor Lamb, supported gun rights. Spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars making sure that everybody in Pennsylvania knew that Connor Lamb, the Democrat, was a believer in gun rights. So who knows, but that Paul Ryan, his PAC, they might have pushed Connor Lamb over the top with pro-gun Democrats. So it's hard to figure that. Thousands of dollars spent basically to boost the candidacy, maybe, of Connor Lamb. So anyway, that's we'll ask Patrick Howley about that. That confuses the heck out of me. I just don't see the strategy behind that.
Hey, Brian.
I'm guessing what they were figuring is that, well, Democrats are not, they're anti-gun, so if they find out that Connor Lamb is pro-gun, they'll vote for the other guy. But, you know, if they're anti-gun, why would they vote for Rick Saccone, the stronger of the two gun rights? I mean, there's no way that's a good idea.
One of the things that about that clip we did on Lamb, that when I was going through that, it really stuck out. You know, he says he's against Nancy Pelosi, but when drilled a little further, he said, well, I won't be able to do anything about it for 2 or 3 years down the road because I will have no bearing in. Yeah, and I'm going, so you ran on the platform of getting rid of Pelosi, but you're saying now that you're, quote, elected,
nothing I can do about
I'm
it.
not going to do anything.
Yeah. Well, you know, the other thing that's interesting about this race, I talked about this briefly some time ago, the district map that the Pennsylvania legislature drew up in 2010. They redraw these district maps every 10 years, and usually the party that's in control will try to draw a map that benefits them. They'll try to draw these district maps so they get sure bets, get districts where they are sure to get a candidate from their party elected. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I think the congressional district map ought to be drawn up as neutrally as possible. You try to follow boundary lines that are natural, city limits, county lines, whatever, but try to draw a district map that has people that live together in the same district. Don't have a congressional district line right through a middle of a neighborhood or a community of people if you can possibly avoid it. But don't try to draw it to favor one political party or another. But anyway, the Supreme Court said, well, we think that the Republicans drew this map up to benefit the Republicans. They've got like a 13-5 lead in the House of Representatives, 13 Republicans, 5 Democrats from Pennsylvania. Well, now it's 12-6 because of Saccone's loss last night. But where was I going with this? Oh, so the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania drew up their own map that favors the Democrats. There, it's a Democrat-controlled Supreme Court. They threw out the Republican map because it was biased, substituted their own map, which is biased for the Democrats. By the way, the Democrats are pretty upset with Hillary Clinton. Remember we played those sound bites yesterday? I promised you we'll never have to listen to the voice of that woman again. But she talked about the fact that I won in all the places where all the sophisticated people live, where all the cool kids live, where all the smart people live, where all the polished people live, the sophisticated people. I won all those districts. All the places where people are making money. I won all those districts. So it was the yahoos and the rednecks that went for Donald Trump. So that's an insult to everybody that voted for Donald Trump, and it's not he got he got 48% of the votes. So she just insulted everybody that voted for Donald Trump. And then that claim that she made that the reason she didn't win the women's vote is that all the husbands out there, all the husbands of white women, were intimidating, bullied their wives into voting for Donald Trump. Their husbands made them vote for Donald Trump, which I think is absolutely absurd. I think our marriage probably represents the average conservative marriage in America. There's no way in the trust me, there is no way in the world that I'm going to tell Debbie who to vote for and she'll do it just because I said so. That ain't going to happen. So it's an insult to conservative women because they think for themselves. Wives think for themselves. They got brains. This is one of the differences between Christianity and Islam, for example. Islam very explicitly teaches that men are superior to women because God made them that way. We don't believe that. We believe that women are different than men because God made them that way, but neither sex or gender is superior to the other. They are complementary. They each have something absolutely necessary, absolutely fundamental to contribute to life, to contribute to marriage, and to contribute to a family. So we believe that women stand as full equals of men in worth and value and significance as heirs of the eternal grace of God. So Hillary Clinton she's just not out there. She just doesn't know. So anyway, Democrats are pretty ticked off at Hillary Clinton because they know that that's not good for the Democratic brand to have the last presidential candidate representing the Democratic Party out there insulting half of the voters in America. This is after, they had to spend the end of the campaign trying to downplay that statement when she called us all a basket of deplorables. And so they're just kind of aghast that she's making things even worse. Here's what one Clinton surrogate said. She's annoying me. She's annoying everyone as far as I can tell. Who lets her say these things? Well, her husband, maybe, if you listen to what Hillary Clinton has to say. So anyway, this is a great line. This is a really good line. One former senior Obama White House aide said this: if these statements from Hillary Clinton are a form of catharsis, it would be in the Democratic Party's best interest for her to get these out of her system soon. So anyway, and by the way, she slipped a couple of times going down the steps. Now, it looked to me like maybe the bottom of her sandals was just kind of slick and she didn't get traction on the stone steps, but she almost went down twice. And the only reason she didn't go down is she had big, strong, burly guys on either arm to hold her up. So anyway, we'll see how that thing in Pennsylvania goes. When we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Senate race going into November. And then we get to the second hour, we're going to talk about these nominations. We're going to talk about waterboarding. Is it or is it not torture? You need to hear this. We'll be right back with your phone call.
Exposing Washington with Walker Wildman.
So who is responsible for the dysfunction in Washington? That's what we're going to be discussing today.
We have become one of the most litigious societies on the planet.
The goal of this show is to bring clarity to the news coming out of Washington, D.C., and to expose the deception that has plagued our nation's capital for decades.
Exposing Washington.
Each Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Central.
On American Family Radio.
All of chapter 4 through 19 has to do with what God is going to do when he pours out his wrath upon the earth. The church won't be here. The church will be in heaven. How do we know that? We just looked in through the door and the church is up there already.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series Escape the Coming Night next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
A Moment of Truth with Gary Bryden, Executive Director of the Association of Independent Methodists.
The songwriter Charles D. Migo wrote, "Others, Lord, yes, others, let this my motto be. Help me to live for others, that I may live like thee." Jesus said, love your enemies. Bless them that curse you, do good to those that hate you. Pray for them which spitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? If you love your brothers only, what do you do more than others? What Jesus shares is not the way to Christ, but it is the way of Christ. Why not try it today?
The Association of Independent Methodists, like-minded congregations doing together what can't be done separately. Visit aim2020.com.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Welcome back to Focal Point. Time to take your calls, open up the phones, talk about anything we've talked about today, anything we've talked about this week, actually. We'll broaden the horizons here. Anything we've talked about this week. Glad to have you weigh in. Number to call is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. And just to give you a fuller picture of where we stand going into the fall elections in 2018. Again, that number is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. This is from Axios.com. 5 Senate Democrats would lose to Republican candidates if the elections were held today, and 3 have approval ratings under 50%. This is according to a new Axios/SurveyMonkey poll. Democrats are defending 10 Senate seats in states that President Trump won in 2016. In 6 of those states, Trump's approval is higher than 50%, and it's an indication of how hard it's going to be for the Democrats to pick up the 2 seats they need to win the majority despite Trump's troubles. The most vulnerable senators are Joe Manchin of West Virginia. By the way, his wife works for the governor in West Virginia. She just got canned yesterday. I don't know what that's going to mean for the race. John Tester in Montana, Tara McCaskill in Missouri. Each of their approval ratings is under 50%, while Trump's is well above it. So his Trump's approval rating is higher than the incumbent senators in 6 states. So whatever influence Donald Trump may have, and again, he campaigned for Saccone in Pennsylvania, couldn't drag him across the finish line. But the point is, Democratic incumbents, incumbents have a huge edge in congressional politics. I mean, incumbents win. In the House, they win like 94% of the time historically, but they are trailing right now in 5 Senate races. So too soon for gloom and doom on the part of the Republican Party. Now, some voters in Pennsylvania, we'll talk with Patrick Howley about this, were not allowed to vote in Pennsylvania because of this redistricting controversy. We'll talk more about that. All right, number to call, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Let's grab a call from Bobby in Mound, Texas. Welcome, Bobby. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Oh, thank you, Brian. My first words would be encouraging. The prayers you pray are so powerful. But I wanted to question that the scripture you just read about the fool says in his heart, no to God. I was under the impression that translated that the fool says in his heart, no to God. So is that correct?
Well, I'll tell you, I have not looked at the Hebrew of that verse in quite a while. Let me see if I can do that on the break at the top of the hour, and I'll get back to you second hour. If you stay tuned, Bobby, I'll let you know what the Hebrew says there. So all right. Stay tuned. All right, thanks for the call. That's a very good question, excellent question. Probably a lot of people would like an answer to that question. Let's go to Eric in Hickory, North Carolina. Welcome, Eric. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hello. You all brought up the chapter in Romans in regards to
Romans chapter 1. Yeah.
Yep. I believe that one also, that verse chapter year before, after that mentions worshiping the creation instead of the creator.
Yes.
And so I would say that he further exemplifies that chapter because, well, I'd say he definitely worships the creation and believing that the universe could self-create like he believed.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point because he has no place for the creator in his world. So the only alternative is to worship something that God has made. It doesn't matter what you worship. It's something that God has made. Even if you worship yourself, who made you? Where did you come from? So you're right. That's a very good point. I appreciate the observation, Eric. That's a very good point. Let's go to Joe in Starkville, Mississippi. Joe, welcome. What's on your mind? Joe, are you there?
Hello?
Yeah, Joe, I got you 5 by 5.
Yeah.
Go right ahead. What's on your mind?
Yeah, this is Joe. Hi.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate y'all's time. Basically, I wanted to share a comparison contrast between Saul and David.
Uh-huh.
And what we see with Saul and David, first the comparison, that's the easy part. Basically, it says about both of them that they both say, I have sinned against the Lord. They both say that. Back when Saul does not wait for Samuel, and when Saul does not kill everybody that he was supposed to kill in the next chapter, or 2 chapters later. Well, anyway, so they both say that, but we see some differences. Saul, for instance, we see that he's told that he is going to lose the kingdom. Well, what does he tell Jonathan later? He tells Jonathan, don't you see that this man is going to take the kingdom from us, talking about David? Well, basically he is in rebellion to that which God had revealed. But we see over another thing about Saul, we see that he also 3 times threw a javelin, twice at David, once at Jonathan. That shows us this is a man that is going to continue doing what he was doing. He's not going to repent.
Yeah.
And then we look at David, though. Now, David, we have what Nathan tells him about the man and the sheep, and Nathan tells him, you are that man. Well, he then tells him that his wives would be seen having basically immorality in front of all the people, which people could hear it from the tents, and that what's the other thing? Oh yeah, that the sword would not depart from his house. So we saw that happen also.
Yes.
But there's another thing. If we go back to that sheep, we realize David paid 4-fold because David lost his baby, then his son Amnon, then his son Absalom, and then his son Adonijah. So we see a stark contrast because one accepted the punishment that God wanted to give, and the other one did not accept it. And here's the thing. With Saul, it started with disobedience and then not accepting the punishment. With David, it did start with disobedience, but he did accept the punishment. And we see David's own words in Psalm 103 that God will have mercy on those that fear him, and later in that same psalm, those that keep his commandments. So we see such a huge contrast with these two men, and we see God's mercy on those that fear him. And
okay, Joe, great observations about Saul and David, and that's what frustrated Samuel. I mean, he loved both of these guys, but Saul's repentance was always shallow. His promises were empty. He was always trying to manipulate Samuel. He'd do something wrong, then he'd try to manipulate Samuel into excusing it and still giving him some form of blessing, until finally Samuel just had to say to Saul, look, I can't deal with you any longer. I am out of here. All right, Joe, thank you for the call. Let's grab a call from Wes in Corpus Christi, Texas. Wes, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hey, Brian. Blessings to you and your ministry.
Thank you very much, sir.
And greetings from the best-named city in America, the Body of Christ, Texas, Corpus Christi.
Exactly right.
All right. No, I just wanted to ask a follow-up on the whole Roy Moore ordeal.
Yes, sir.
Obviously he was in the news, or I should say he and his accusers were in the news every day before the election, and I haven't heard anything since then. So what's happened to all his accusers?
Yeah. Well, it's been pretty quiet over there, and I honestly, Wes, do not know a lot more than you do. I do know that I believe, this is my latest information, that the judge has filed a lawsuit against one of his accusers for defamation of character, which, of course, you are allowed to do. It's wrong to make those kind of accusations against somebody, false accusations like that. Obviously the damage to Roy Moore's reputation. How many people in this country believe those lies? They're absolute, total falsehoods and lies. But people believe him. People in his own party believe him. So he is taking her to court in the middle of working on that. Haven't heard much else about him. We're hoping to have him on, Wes, in the next couple of weeks, and maybe we can find out from Roy Moore himself exactly what's going on in his world. All right, Wes, look, so as far as the accusers, I haven't heard anything about them. They've just kind of disappeared, which is typical in these situations. They just kind of disappear because they were convinced to do this thing for a short time, manipulated into doing it. Then when they're done, they're just kind of used up and thrown away. Okay, thanks for the call, Wes. I appreciate it. Let's go to Lan in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Lan, welcome. What's on your mind? Are you with me, Lan? Okay, I guess we got no Lan. All right, well, sorry about that, Lan. I guess we got a hitch in our get-along here. I'd love to get you on. Sorry we missed you. Number is 888-589-8840. If you want to get a call in here in the last bit of the hour. Went to Psalm 14:1, which is where the verse is found. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. And that is literally the translation of the Hebrew. The word for fool there is Nabal. Remember, that's Abigail's husband's name. She was the one that pleaded with David to spare Nabal's life. His name means fool, and he was a fool. But the fool says, uses the standard Hebrew verb for says. So Nabal says, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. That is literally the way the Hebrew text reads. Uses one word that means there is no. That one word is translated that way. The fool says in his heart, there is no God, that God does not exist. So that is an accurate translation. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. All right, well, we will be back after the news to carry on. Got some more content coming up at 2:15. We'll talk with Patrick Howley, who is the editor-in-chief of Big League Politics. He covered the 2016 presidential campaign for Breitbart, and then he's branched off and started a new website called Big League Politics. He's the editor-in-chief there. We're going to talk with him about Chai Feldblum, that's Trump's nominee for the EEOC, and then we'll talk about what he knows about what went on in Pennsylvania's 18th district. We'll be right back after the news. Stay with us, Focal Point, American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
1milliondads.com Be strengthened as a Christian leader for your wife and children, your church, your community. We believe that missing fathers is what's wrong with this country. 1milliondads.com is where we can learn and grow together as men of the cross. 1milliondads.com. Lead, or others will.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News on the Hour. I'm Chad Groening. Results of the special election in southwest Pennsylvania may not be known for another 2 weeks, but that hasn't stopped Democratic candidate Connor Lamb from declaring victory over Republican candidate Rick Saccone. The pair are separated by a very thin margin of just over 600 votes, as a large number of absentee ballots remain to be counted. Larry Spar is the director of elections for Washington County and says his team will work hard to ensure the results are fair for everyone.
No, you're not going to see official results Friday because the canvass board has to convene and audit all 125 precincts. Sometimes it goes beyond that. Sometimes in municipal elections it could go as long as 2 weeks.
Many Democrats and other political pundits point to the Pennsylvania special election as a possible harbinger of the 2018 midterm elections because the district where Lamb is claiming victory had been won by President Trump during the 2016 election by roughly 20 points over Hillary Clinton. And House Speaker Paul Ryan is privately warning Republicans of a bit of a wake-up call as Democrat Connor Lamb edged past the Republican in the Pennsylvania special election. Ryan told House Republicans on Wednesday that they need to get to work, fundraise, and not be caught off guard heading into the midterm campaign season where Democratic enthusiasm is real. Publicly, Ryan was more upbeat, blaming the Pennsylvania outcome on Lamb's centrist views. On a visit to California, President Trump toured some prototypes for the southern border wall, while also taking a swipe at the state's leadership. Fox's Jessica Rosenthal explains.
The president called a wall the first line of defense and compared its potential to what's already there, noting the patch job on holes in existing fencing.
That wall they can get over very easily. These walls they can't.
He said he preferred one with a see-through element on the bottom, that without one you could be standing 2 feet from a cartel and not know it.
And they have the cartels, and the cartels, we're fighting the cartels, and we're fighting them hard. Nobody ever fought them like we fought them.
He called on Congress to pass a budget that funds it. All of it, not in a piecemeal fashion. But he also floated this idea.
The wall will save hundreds of billions of dollars, many, many times what it's going to cost.
When asked if money for a wall, though, would be better spent on other items, like California's Governor Jerry Brown has said, Trump responded with this.
Governor Brown's done a very poor job running California. They have the highest taxes in the United States. The place is totally out of control.
He said sanctuary jurisdictions like California protect criminals. After he saw the border wall prototypes, he spoke to military service members at Marine Corps Air Station Miramar. Then he held a Republican Party fundraiser in Beverly Hills. In San Diego, Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
Physicist Stephen Hawking beat all the odds to become the most famous scientist of his generation, pursuing a brilliant career and never thinking there was anything he couldn't do. Hawking died Wednesday at age 76. Some college students are spending their spring break in Houston, helping residents rebuild their homes from the devastation that Hurricane Harvey wrought nearly 7 months ago. AFN's Bill Bumpus reports.
A group from the University of Kentucky is working hard this week in southeast Texas. Through the ministry Crew, formerly known as Campus Crusade for Christ, the students are joining thousands of volunteers across the country to join the rebuilding efforts of the Christian relief ministry 8 Days of Hope.
This is something I'll never forget.
Kentucky student Anaya Hall.
Just when I heard about it, I just knew I would want to help people, because putting yourself in their shoes, you would want somebody to help you. You wouldn't want to just be abandoned. You wouldn't want to be forgotten about.
Hall and these volunteers are putting the finishing touches on a home that was flooded by Hurricane Harvey. This woman lives here with her adult daughter and is glad to have her house back in order.
You have no idea. We wait for this moment for a long time, and I feel so blessed.
She has only one word to describe her home now.
Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful.
I'm Bill Bumpus in Houston.
Remember, you can access American Family News 24 hours a day, 7 days a week when you log on to the World Wide Web at onenewsnow.com. And that is American Family News on the Hour. I'm Chad Groening.
Some 2,000 years ago, the followers of the crucified Christ learned that he had risen from the grave. They quickly spread the word that Jesus was alive. It's good news that spread from one generation to the next, and now it's our turn. One way to tell this extraordinary news to others is by simply wearing and sharing our colorful He Lives Easter buttons. Get your pack of 10 today at afastore.net.
I'm really at a point where we're getting very close to having the cabinet and other things that I want. I've worked with Mike Pompeo now for quite some time. We're always on the same wavelength. Rex and I have been talking about this for a long time. We got along actually quite well, but we disagreed on things. When you look at the Iran deal, I think it's terrible. I guess he thought it was okay.
When I have a see-through wall, sir, I know what's approaching the border before it approaches.
You have to know what's on the other side of the wall. California's sanctuary policies put the entire nation at risk. They're the best friend of the criminal. Congress must fund the border wall.
The renowned physicist Stephen Hawking has labeled himself as an atheist, clearly stating that he doesn't believe God exists at all.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Incoming. Welcome back to the second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Let's jump into some stuff we want to talk about this hour. First, with regard to Mike Pompeo, the sacking of Rex Tillerson, and you heard a little bit. We're going to play some sound from Donald Trump about the differences that he had with Rex Tillerson, and they actually were fairly pronounced. The differences between Trump and Tillerson, they differed, for instance, on moving the embassy to Jerusalem. Rex Tillerson really argued with Trump about that, didn't want to do it. They have a difference on the Iran nuclear deal. Tillerson wants to find a way to keep that thing. Trump wants to trash it, knows it's a bad deal. And there is another issue in which they differ pretty significantly. It escapes my mind. I think there's 4 of them altogether. I can't think of what the other 2 are now. But they're just some fairly serious differences in thought processes and positions on that.
Could Israel be one?
Well, I mentioned that the support of Israel and the movement of the embassy.
Okay.
They had a strong difference of opinion on that. So let's go to clip 4. I don't know if this is the. Well, no, that's Tillerson actually showing a little bit of strength on the deal. So anyway, it's not a loss to have Tillerson gone, especially as being replaced by Pompeo. Pompeo is a really sharp guy. He's a really bright guy. He's got an immense amount of character, and he is a solid believer in Jesus Christ. This guy is hardcore. He's the real deal, believes in Christ, and will be trusting him in that role. Well, let's play a couple of Tillerson clips leading into this. This is clip number 1. Rex Tillerson, these were his farewell marks when he left office yesterday. And I'm not going to play the whole thing, but ask yourself what's missing in his remarks.
I've worked with Mike Pompeo now for quite some time.
Trump on Tillerson.
Tremendous energy, tremendous intellect. We're always on the same wavelength. The relationship has been very good, and that's what I need as Secretary of State. I've gotten to know a lot of people very well over the last year, and I'm really at a point where we're getting very close to having the cabinet and other things that I want. But I think Mike Pompeo will be a truly great Secretary of State. I have total confidence in him. And as far as Rex Tillerson is concerned, I very much appreciate his commitment and his service, and I wish him well. Rex and I have been talking about this for a long time. We got along actually quite well, but we disagreed on things. When you look at the Iran deal, I think it's terrible. I guess he thought it was okay. I wanted to either break it or do something, and he felt a little bit differently. So we were not really thinking the same. With Mike Pompeo, we have a very similar thought process. I think it's going to go very well.
So I think, and I think what's going on here is this whole year, I would liken this whole first year for Donald Trump to a shakeout cruise. Remember, this guy has never been in public office before, never been president before, never even been around presidents who have to pick cabinet members. So he's flying blind going into this thing. I mean, he's picked personnel to work for him and with him all his business life, but he's never been in the political world doing that. And so here's my guess, is that when he started out, he really didn't even know where to look because he's not familiar with the people in Washington, D.C. who have experience. He's just not around there. He just doesn't work in those circles, doesn't have relationships in those circles. So my guess is when he goes to D.C., he starts talking to people that he does trust, that he does know. Who would you recommend, for instance, for Secretary of State? Who do you think I ought to get? And they wind up giving him suggestions, and Tillerson kind of rises to the top. I never thought Tillerson was a good fit for that job for a number of reasons. I didn't like him because he's a big proponent of the homosexual agenda. I do not want the Secretary of State that represents the values of the United States of America to be a guy that's pushing the homosexual agenda, because homosexuality is bad for people. It's sexually deviant behavior. It leaves them diseased. It shortens their lifespan. It leaves them lonely. There's nothing good about homosexuality at all. I do not want a Secretary of State who's out on the world stage representing the values of America, sending that kind of a message, and that's what Rex Tillerson was. Remember, Rex Tillerson was the guy that got homosexual scout leaders into the Boy Scouts. How much damage is going to come out of that? Yeah. And that was his deal. He was responsible. He was in charge. He was the head of the board, chairman of the board, when the Scouts did that kind of thing. So I don't think Tillerson is going to be a great loss. He was a big-time supporter of global warming. That's where the real moaning and grieving today is, in the global warming community, because they were counting on Rex Tillerson to be a fanboy for what they wanted to get done on the world stage. He thought it was a mistake, for instance, to pull out of the climate accords, the Paris climate accords. Trump couldn't wait to pull out of those things. That, again, those are an example of some of the differences, some of the tensions that existed between Trump and Rex Tillerson. I think we're better off with him being gone. I do want to play one Rex Tillerson clip. It's clip number 4, and this touches on the whole issue of Russia and its place in the world. Let's listen.
And much work remains to respond to the troubling behavior and actions on the part of the Russian government. Russia must assess carefully as to how its actions are in the best interest of the Russian people and of the world more broadly. Continuing on their current trajectory is likely to lead to greater isolation on their part, a situation which is not in anyone's interest.
All right, so zings Russia on the way out the door. The only criticism that he gave in the speech, he didn't say anything, by the way. The thing was missing is he didn't say anything nice about Trump. Didn't thank him for the opportunity to serve. Didn't say anything about appreciating his time in the White House, any of that. He just left. So so that was Tillerson, reminding that Russia's a problem, and it still is. It's like that difference between Romney and Barack Obama. Romney saying the biggest concern we ought to have in the geopolitical stage is Russia. Obama sneers at him, very snides, contemptuous, ridicules it. The 80s called, they want their foreign policy back, and Romney was right the whole time. And by the way, Obama hired GPS, this firm that came up with that phony dossier, that Christopher Steele dossier, the phony dossier on Trump and all that organization, GPS, Obama hired them to dig up dirt on Mitt Romney. So he was determined to find some way to neutralize Romney. Let's go to, I want to save those for after our conversation with our next guest. Let's grab Donald Trump, clip 2. Donald Trump at the southern border where they're looking at prototypes of the wall. They got all those prototypes up in the desert. Donald Trump was there taking a tour of them yesterday. Here's his comment. Clip 2.
Well, I do have a preference. The problem is you have to have see-through. You have to know what's on the other side of the wall. And, I mean, a preference is something like that. The problem is you don't know what's on the other side of the wall. And if you don't know what's on, I mean, you could be 2 feet away from a criminal cartel and you don't even know they're there. Now, we have equipment to take care of that, X-ray equipment, etc. But if you're on that side of the wall, that's the hardest wall to scale. It's got a lot of assets. The problem is, tell them, what do you think about the importance of see-through?
When I have a see-through wall, sir, I know what's approaching the border before it approaches. We have great partners in Mexico with the law enforcement on that side. I can call them for assistance. I don't get the opportunity to get ahead of a threat if I can't see it approaching.
All right, so I think that's the general consensus that I've been reading from the Border Patrol guys. The walls are all about 30 feet high, and remember, they can't get over those things. You know, remember when they said you put a 15-foot wall up, we'll bring a 16-foot ladder? They've had tactical teams, SWAT teams, trying to climb those walls. They can't do it. They get to the top, they got no way to get down. But if you see them coming from below and then solid on top, back in two.
You shall not murder. Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. This is the 6th commandment of the 10 commandments. You shall not murder. We are asking schools all over America to put this on their marquees, put this on their signs out in front of their school for 1 week to remind America's students that innocent life is precious. Help us spread the word about this campaign to your friends and family. Please go to our website, afa.net, and sign our open letter to America's schools. We need to proclaim this message, you shall not murder, across the land. Why? Because gun control alone will not solve matters of the heart. We need our young people to understand that murder is a violation of God's law, and also it's a violation of the laws all across this land. So help us. Go to afa.net and spread the word.
Hey, my name's Brant. You ever make a change and then wonder, why didn't I do this a long time ago? That's what's happening for thousands of people with regard to their health care. They're joining Medishare, and then they're wondering, why didn't I already do this? For most members, it costs less than half what they were paying for their old health plan. There's a huge provider network, too. You can customize your plan, and this is awesome. Medishare members can go online with a doctor 24/7. So if you need a prescription for the flu or something, it's so convenient for you and your family. So yeah, this is one of those why did I wait on this things. And if you don't love your current health plan, you're not stuck with it. You can join Medishare anytime. By the way, to give you an idea, the typical savings for a family, about $500 a month. It just makes so much sense. Check it out. They're super easy to talk to. Call 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, and welcome back to the second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name, congenial, convivial, and amiable as always. You are listening to Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio. Welcome to the second hour. Honored to welcome to our decision maker line Patrick Howley. Patrick is the editor-in-chief of Big League Politics, a hard-hitting conservative opinion and news site. Glad to have you on board, Patrick. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, and thank you also for your strong support for Judge Moore.
All right.
It meant a lot to a lot of people.
Okay, you're sure welcome. I tell you, I thought it was a disgrace, Patrick, what was done to him by the Republican Party. I don't know if you want to comment about this, but I'll just take a minute. I just thought it was a disgrace. You know, I thought his accusers, their stories just completely fell apart upon closer examination. There was no substance to it. There was no verification for it. And I thought it was just a shame the way the Republican Party abandoned him, and now they're down to a margin of 1 vote in the Senate. That's a race that they could have won.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, as we reported, it was a Jeb Bush operative who actually leaked the story to the Washington Post in the first place, and Mitch McConnell was campaigning against his own Republican candidate. Even yesterday in Pennsylvania, you saw Paul Ryan's super PAC coming out and supporting Connor Lamb and sending out mailers in support of him. So for some reason, the Republican establishment in Washington keeps running against their own candidates recently, and it's a very strange thing that needs to be addressed.
Well, it seems like, Patrick, this may be too strong a way to put it, but it seems like they're swamp creatures first and Republicans second. I mean, their first loyalty seems to be to the political establishment in D.C. They're all part of the same club, and they all want to stay in that club. And that seems to be where the first loyalty of somebody like Mitch McConnell lies, which is the only reason I can think why he's keeping alive that phony filibuster that takes 60 votes. They can't get a single piece of good conservative legislation through the Senate. I just call it the fake-a-buster because they got to get 60 votes. They're not going to get 9 Democrats to go along with virtually anything.
No, it's very odd because in the age of Trump, the conservative base keeps getting stronger, and yet the party establishment in Washington keeps getting weaker, and allowing the Democrats to compete. There's no reason the Democrats should be this competitive right now, considering Trump's popularity. But it's a very strange time for the Republican Party. They need to figure out what their identity is.
And Patrick, you just mentioned a minute ago the involvement of Paul Ryan's PAC in the congressional race in Pennsylvania, which I assume has not been completely settled yet, maybe too close to call, might be a runoff. The Democrat candidate, Conor Lamb, has claimed victory there, maybe just a little bit premature, but he's got about a 600-vote lead at this point. But you mentioned Paul Ryan actually weighing in on behalf of Conor Lamb, the Democrat. Explain that. I'm looking at the article that you guys posted on your website, bigleaguepolitics.com. This is baffling to me. Tell us what happened.
It's absolutely incredible because in public, Paul Ryan offered moderate support for the Republican Rick Saccone. However, his Congressional Leadership Fund, which is his super PAC, and basically a mouthpiece for him and what he wants to get done, was sending out mailers all through the district saying that Conor Lamb is a strong conservative and a strong supporter of gun rights. So for some reason, Paul Ryan's super PAC felt the need to quietly support the Democrat in the race, which is actually astonishing that Paul Ryan would give Nancy Pelosi another vote in Washington, D.C. Conor Lamb may be running as a moderate, but as soon as he gets to Washington as a Democrat, he's going to be voting to fund Planned Parenthood in his first continuing resolution. He's going to be voting for gun control measures in lockstep with the Democrats. So why is Paul Ryan giving the other side another vote in Congress? And I think that the only conclusion here is that he wants to weaken and damage President Donald Trump and his brand because there's a civil war going on in the Republican Party between the McConnell and Ryan establishment wing and the Trump wing, which obviously is much more popular with average, regular, everyday people.
Yeah. Well, that what you're talking about there, and the story is at bigleaguepolitics.com. That story about Paul Ryan's PAC making sure that everybody in that district knew that Conor Lamb was a supporter of the Second Amendment and was an opponent of new gun laws. I mean, this is just baffling to me because that's typically what Republicans run on. So, and maybe they're thinking, well, it'll backfire on them because they're all against gun laws in this district. So when they find out that Conor Lamb is a pro-gun guy, they'll vote for they'll vote for Rick Saccone. But why in the world would they do that? If one pro-gun guy is bad, why would they vote for the other pro-gun guy? That just makes no logical sense to me whatsoever as a strategy.
Yep. No, it's very strange, and it's similar to Alabama, actually, where they positioned Doug Jones as sort of a moderate and told us, well, he's a more conservative Democrat. They did the same thing with Conor Lamb this time, having him run pro-life and relatively pro-gun, and so that allowed this Republican establishment to actually support the Democrat. I think it's disgraceful. At any other time, even during Bush, during Reagan, you never would have seen the Republican Party sabotaging their own candidates, and that's what's happening right now because the Republicans are, trying to negotiate, I guess, behind the scenes with President Trump and trying to weaken him on some of these things. They don't like his tariffs. They don't like the things that he does that aren't party line Republican agenda points. And so they're trying to sabotage him and sandbag him in some of these elections. It's incredible.
One other thing I wanted to pick your brain, talking here with Patrick Howley, who is the editor-in-chief at Big League Politics. You can go to bigleaguepolitics.com. A story that you yourself posted up on your website there about some voters that were not being allowed to vote in Pennsylvania due to this congressional districting mix-up and redrawing congressional maps and all that. Explain that to us.
Yeah, so also very similar to Alabama. There was a situation where there were a number of reports on the ground in Pennsylvania, in the district, of people being told at the polling place that they couldn't go in and vote. The reason for that is because the Democrats redrew the congressional map in coordination with the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which is Democrat majority. However, since that new map was pending on appeal, this election was only for the existing 18th district. So these polling places had no right
to turn people away. There were rightful voters at the polls being turned away. So I got on the phone yesterday around 3:30 p.m. with the Saccone campaign, and they confirmed. We've been hearing reports of this on the ground. This is incredible. It's very similar to Alabama and Madison County, where they said that some of the polling machines broke, and they gave people provisional ballots and said, maybe your vote will count. And I know for a fact that thousands of those votes were never counted. So you have major election integrity issues going on all over the country. And a lot of these places are like the Wild West when it comes to election law. And Trump really needs to do something before the midterms, and especially before he runs for re-election, about the way that they can manipulate the election results. This is a very big problem.
Well, let's turn our attention. I wanted to talk with you specifically, Patrick, about the nomination of Donald Trump of Chai Feldblum, that's C-H-A-I, I guess like the T or something like that. The nomination of Donald Trump, she's an Obama holdover. He's nominated her to become the chairman of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, but she is a hardcore lesbian activist. And Patrick, she said, look, if it's a conflict between religious liberty and the homosexual agenda, she could not find a single case in which religious liberty ought to win. So, Donald Trump campaigned on being a friend of religious liberty. He's done good things on the religious liberty issue since he's been inaugurated. How do you explain him nominating Chai Feldblum for this role, which could affect every workplace in the country?
Well, it definitely could affect every workplace in the country. The EEOC is really kind of like the mob. What they do is they go around the country and they sue businesses for, allegedly discriminating against employees. And this person, Chai Feldblum, who is very close with Obama, came out against the Christian bakery that did not want to, bake a homosexual wedding cake. She has, really intimidated the Christian community in this country. How do I explain the fact that Trump has renominated her? Well, first of all, I think this is a good question for Sarah Sanders in the White House press briefing. But secondly, a lot of these what we see now going on with the administration, if you look at the Russia scandal, for instance, why is Rod Rosenstein still the Deputy Attorney General? Why did James Comey hang on so long? Why are these people still entrenched? And the reason is they got in during Obama. They hired a ton of people under them. And so it becomes a lot harder to fire them. And I think with everything that President Trump is going through right now with North Korea and other things, he didn't want to fight this battle with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, especially considering that if you anger these people, they can come at you and come at your businesses, like the Trump Organization, in a very big way. Not that his business affects his policy decisions, but these are very savage people when it comes to pushing their agenda, and they will target you like the mafia. So this is, not a situation where President Trump did what he wanted to do. This was a situation where he lost one of these battles, and this Feldblum person apparently is powerful enough to hang on.
Well, I got one question for you. Last question here before I let you go. Talking here with Patrick Howley, the editor-in-chief of Big League Politics. Let's say that she gets out of committee. I know that here at the American Family Association, we're going to raise some questions with senators about her qualifications for being in this position and kind of urge them to vote against her confirmation. But I'm kind of curious about what's going to happen. I don't know if you ask you to be kind of a prognosticator here for a second. What's going to happen to her? And here's a Republican president nominating her, an Obama holdover. So you would think that the Democrats would vote for her pretty much en masse because she's a big-time supporter of the homosexual agenda, which leaves the question about the Republicans. They would still have enough votes to stop her if they all hung together, but my guess is they wouldn't. I wonder if you might have a deal where she gets confirmed with more Democrat votes than Republican votes. Do you think that's possible?
Oh, definitely. But, here's the thing. Trump is a negotiator, and I can't, in my wildest imagination, believe that Trump would want Republicans to vote to confirm this person, even though he did technically renominate her. And so, it's one of those things where do as I say, not as I do. And we're going to have to look at these Republicans, especially ones who are up for re-election, including Senator Roger Wicker. Is he going to vote to, confirm this person? There are a lot of Republicans who are in a vulnerable position right now, who are incumbents. Dean Heller, for instance, are they going to vote for this person? So I think this is going to be a good bellwether test to see whether a lot of these Republicans are with the establishment or they're with real family values and Christian values in the United States of America.
Our guest has been Patrick Howley, Editor-in-Chief of Big League Politics. Patrick, enjoyed chatting with you. We look forward to having you back on as things develop. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Patrick Howley, Big League Politics. We'll be right back with more content. Stay with us. Focal Point, American Family Radio.
Attention all Christians who believe that America needs a spiritual revival, an awakening, a message of the gospel for our times. This is Alex McFarland encouraging you to attend the 2018 edition of Truth for a New Generation. This is a conference with the theme Save a Nation. And on March 23-24 in Greensboro, North Carolina, you will hear an amazing lineup of speakers, including Josh McDowell, apologist J. Warner Wallace, Lauren Green and Todd Starnes from Fox News, attorney Abe Hamilton III of the American Family Association, music by the bands and orchestra from North Greenville University, and much, much more. Sessions for all ages, equipping you to share your faith confidently in any situation. Visit truthforanewgeneration.com. That's March 23-24, TNG 2018. You can find it at truthforanewgeneration.com.
Presented in part by the American Family Association.
Are you a responsible person who finds yourself growing deeper and deeper in credit card debt and you're not sure how to fix the problem? Then get ready for a toll-free number that will put you on a path to financial recovery. Trinity Debt Management is a nonprofit organization that will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, put a stop to late fees and over-limit charges, and reduce your interest rates by as much as 60%. You'll save thousands and become debt-free for keeps. It's not a loan. It's a smart way to relieve your stress, meet your obligations, and preserve your self-respect. If your debt has you down, we should talk. Gather up your bills and call this toll-free number for a free, no-obligation debt analysis. 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813. If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, be among the very first every morning to find out what the day's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher.
Brian J. Fisher.
Welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point, the home of high-definition radio. More content per cubic inch of air than any other place on your radio dial. I want to mention just for a couple of moments, I've got a brand new column that's up at afa.net. Encourage you to go there and read it and share it, learn it, live it, love it. But share it with your friends, people in your small group, your cell group, Sunday school class, bowling league. Share it on Facebook. The link is up at Facebook. It's also we also sent it out on Twitter. But it's a column I wrote for today. We talked about it some the other day, so I won't take a lot of time on this. But Jeff Sessions gave that great speech to the Federalist Society. They converted it into an essay, which appeared at National Review Online. It's a terrific essay at National Review Online. And here's the point I'm going to make, and you can read the column to get the rest of the support on this. But there's a major myth out there that everybody believes. You ask the average person in America, what is the job of the Supreme Court? And most people will say, well, what they're supposed to do is to interpret the Constitution. That's a lie. That's a bald-faced falsehood. That's not their job. That's not what they're supposed to do. But that myth has gained so much currency that people just believe it. So they believe the job of the judiciary is to take the Constitution and interpret it. And that is not true. Jeff Sessions put it this way. I'm going to quote him and then tell you why this is important. Under our Constitution, he says, Congress writes our laws, the executive branch carries out our laws, and the judiciary applies those laws to cases and controversies. That's the word. What the judiciary is to do is to apply the laws, not to interpret them. When people start talking about judges interpreting the law and the Constitution, that scares me to death, because you get a judge who thinks his job is to interpret the First Amendment. Well, I'm going to interpret Establishment Clause to mean anybody says something nice about God, I'm going to stop them. So they think the establishment thinks, they interpret it to mean if anybody references God, talks about God, alludes to God, that can't be done. But we know from history that the word establishment had a very, very precise meaning at the time the Constitution was enacted. It meant to pick one Christian denomination and make it the official denomination, the official church of the United States, and compel people to support it with taxpayer dollars. That's what it means. That's what Congress is prohibited from doing according to the First Amendment. And so the Establishment Clause doesn't have anything to do with saying nice things about God. It has everything to do with picking one denomination and forcing everybody to support it with their tax dollars, making it the official church of the United States. So when people talk about, so they're supposed to understand the Constitution. I'm not saying they're not supposed to understand it, but if you understand the Constitution, then what you're supposed to do then is you're to apply it. It's like the laws of baseball. You know, the umpires in baseball, they learn to understand the rule book. And then their job is to go out in a game and apply the rule book according to the standards that are set by the Rules Committee of Baseball. It's not their job. They don't have the latitude to make up rules on the fly, to change rules on the fly. So I would encourage you, and I think Jeff Sessions has tumbled to it here. This is very, very important, because Jeff Sessions is one of the first public officials that I have ever heard who's used the word apply instead of interpret. And this is a very, very critical distinction. Judges are not supposed to interpret the Constitution or the laws. They are supposed to apply them neutrally, even-handedly, and objectively. So they obviously got to understand the Constitution. But give an example of what that means. If you understand the Constitution, what's the first word in the First Amendment? It's Congress. So if a federal judge understands that, he understands the Constitution prohibits Congress in the First Amendment, then if a case comes before him that has to do with an elementary school or a high school or a college, he's going to say, get out of my courtroom. I have no jurisdiction over that, because that's not Congress. A college isn't forbidden to do that. A high school is not forbidden to do that. A elementary school isn't forbidden to do it, because they're not Congress. So go away. The First Amendment only tells Congress what it can and cannot do. This is a matter for your state constitution, your state laws, and your state courts. Go back home and take it up with them. And also when it comes to establishment. You know, if you had a judge who understands the Constitution, understand what establishment means, picking one church and making it the official denomination, that's the only way that the only way the Establishment Clause can be violated, ladies and gentlemen, the only way that the Establishment Clause can be even possibly violated is if Congress, not a school or a principal or a teacher, but if Congress passes a law, not a resolution or something like that, but actually enacts a law that picks one denomination, like the Presbyterian Church or the Methodist Church or the Southern Baptist Church or whatever, and makes that church the official church of the United States and tells everybody you got to tithe to this thing. You got to give taxpayer money to this thing. That's the only way. That's the only thing that anybody can do to violate the First Amendment. And that would be the case if judges understood that their role was to apply the Constitution rather than to interpret it. So pick up the column. It's at afa.net. Judges are not supposed to interpret the law, but to apply it. All right, let's grab clip number 3. This is Donald Trump again at the display of all of the prototypes for the wall. And remember, we've talked about this. I mean, the illegal aliens out there yesterday, I read an article, we'll just climb over that thing. They will not. We had some of the best SWAT team people trying to do that thing. They could get up to the top of it, some of them. One guy got to the top of one 30-foot wall, couldn't get down. They had to bring in a cherry picker to get him down, lest he fell off the thing and broke his neck. So, and they want him with separation between the stanchions underneath so they can see what's on the other side of the wall. I think that's a great idea. then they're not able to climb it. But here is Donald Trump at the border talking about sanctuary cities, clip 3.
California's sanctuary policies put the entire nation at risk. They're the best friend of the criminal. That's what exactly is happening. The criminals take refuge in these sanctuary cities. And it's very dangerous for our police and enforcement folks. The smugglers, the traffickers, the gang members, they're all taking refuge. And I think a lot of people in California understand that. A lot of people from a lot of other places understand it, and they don't want sanctuary cities. These policies release dangerous criminal offenders to prey on innocent people and nullify the federal law. They're threatening the security and the safety of the people of our country. In the upcoming omnibus budget bill, Congress must fund the border wall and prohibit grants to sanctuary jurisdictions that threaten the security of our country and the people of our country.
You know what's interesting? If they do this in the omnibus bill, no money for sanctuary cities in the budget. There's no money in the budget for it. It's zeroed out, which is where it ought to be. You know, judges are going to gnash their teeth at that. Are they going to try to order Congress to spend money? I mean, that would be the most blatant violation of the Constitution you could possibly get, because the Constitution says that every bill, every revenue bill, has to start in the House of Representatives. It's not possible, not permissible, for a revenue bill to start in the Supreme Court. Now, I want to talk about this waterboarding business just for a second. Let's go to clip R1. Brian Kilmeade on Fox News talking with James Mitchell. James Mitchell wrote a book called Enhanced Interrogation about waterboarding. Now, waterboarding, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to say it now and I'm going to repeat it. Waterboarding is not torture. Learn it, live it, love it. Waterboarding is not torture. Repeat after me. Waterboarding is not torture.
We would give you an example of real torture, but you said we can't play any more Hillary clips. So.
Yeah, you want some real enhanced interrogation.
Yeah.
Tie somebody to a tree and then play Hillary Clinton speeches in his ear all night long. He'll tell you anything you want to know. Okay, Brian Kilmeade, clip R1, talking to James Mitchell, who's an expert on the ins and outs of enhanced interrogation. Let's listen.
Later in her career,
hold on. My bad. I got to set this up. First, we're going to hear from Ari Velshi at MSNBC. This is what you're going to hear from the left. You're going to hear this from the talking snake media ad nauseum. This is all you're going to hear from the talking snake media about Gina Haspel. She's the nominee to become the head of the CIA. She worked in one of these first black sites where they did this kind of enhanced interrogation with terrorists to get information out of them to save American lives, and it worked. And you got the left yammering about this being torture. It absolutely flatly is not. Even though the Bush administration caved into pressure in 2006 and said, okay, we're going to make it illegal, it was examined carefully by people at the Department of Justice when it was first instituted in around 2002. They said, look, this is not torture. It is legal. It is permissible. Do not forget that jihadis, they have no rights under the Geneva Convention. Rights under the Geneva Convention, which exempt you from this kind of interrogation, are only for those that fight in uniform, that have some kind of recognizable chain of command and all that kind of stuff. That fight in uniform, and jihadists don't do any of that stuff. All right, clip R1, we'll start with Ari Velshi.
Later in her career, Haspel was heavily involved in the CIA's controversial torture program. In 2002, she ran a secret CIA prison for suspected terrorists in Thailand that used harsh interrogation tactics, including waterboarding, sleep deprivation, even squeezing detainees into coffins.
Do you have the same concern that those newscasters did? And Senator Cardin?
Well, not at all. You have to remember that the program was the policy at the time. It came from the highest levels of government. It was operated under the direction of the presidency, with the president, with the consent of the National Security Agency. The Attorney General approved of the program and said that it wasn't torture. And hundreds of people were involved in that program in the agency. Whether or not she was, and I think it's not right to hold people accountable to a different set of standards than were in place at the time. That program stopped attacks, disrupted plots, and saved lives.
All right, so James Mitchell says, look, this is a program that got information out of terrorists that saved lives. KSM, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, was waterboarded. He coughed up information that enabled us to stop a number of jihadist attacks on American sites, including a high-rise in Los Angeles. Who knows how many people were saved by enhanced interrogation, which is not torture. So repeat after me, waterboarding is not torture. One of the ways we know this is college students, to protest it, say, look, this is a form of torture. They would have demonstrations on college campuses right out in the middle of the square. Lay somebody down on a bench, and they'd waterboard him. And he'd cough and spit up water and everything. It wasn't torture because he didn't drown. Nobody got arrested. If it's torture, why weren't the campus police all over those demonstrations arresting the people that were doing this to these poor college students? It is not torture. 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Give us a call.
You can heal from the wounds of your past. On the next Focus on the Family, Bart Millard from the popular band Mercy Me shares his story of growing up with an abusive father, the inspiration to start the band, and the impact that their success has had on his marriage. It's a reminder to live authentically next time on Focus on the Family.
Focus on the Family is heard each weekday morning at 5 o'clock Central on American Family Radio.
You wish you could stop thinking about it, but you can't. It never quite leaves your thoughts. Even in the joyful moments, it's there. The sadness, shame, and sorrow. You know you can't go on like this, so don't. Phone the International Helpline for Abortion Recovery at 866-482-LIFE. Your call is confidential, and you'll be talking with someone who's already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
Folks, I know what you think. I want to be able to get my money. I'm not giving my money to anybody. I'm not giving it to the church, not giving it to the ministry. I'm hoarding it. I'm keeping it. I'm going to build. And when it gets so big, I'll build another silo, and I'll build another silo after that. And I'm just going to keep growing it, because when I retire, I'm going to have more money and I know what to do with it. But look, it's important that you consider permanent income. The key word is charitable gift annuity. You notice I don't say charitable annuity. I never leave the word gift out. It's a gift.
A knowledgeable AFA Foundation representative will gladly explain the nuances of charitable gift annuities and answer your questions. Find out about charitable gift annuities when you call 800-326-4543, extension 345. 800-326-4543, extension 345. Or by visiting afafoundation.net.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Focal Point, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, second hour. The number to call to join our conversation, talk about anything we've talked about today is 888-589-8840. 888-589-8840 is the number to call. I want to talk just a little bit about waterboarding a little bit more before we go to the phones. Just give you some facts. These are from a couple of articles by Mark Thiessen, who was part of the Bush administration, and he was very heavily involved in the process of developing and reviewing the waterboarding technique. Now, he says, number one, in this column from 2011, it would be illegal for a foreign adversary to waterboard a U.S. soldier. The reason is that he is a lawful combatant, which means that he wears distinctive insignia like a uniform, follows a clear chain of command, does not hide among innocent civilians, and does not target innocent men, women, and children. So because that's the way America fights the wars, the Geneva Convention, of which America is a signatory, does not allow our soldiers to be waterboarded. But let's not forget that the jihadis are unlawful combatants. They don't wear uniforms. They don't wear distinctive insignia. They don't follow a clear chain of command. They do hide among innocent civilians. In fact, their primary means of attacking us is to target innocent men, women, and children for death. So they've never signed the Geneva Convention. They have no rights under the Geneva Convention. So the United States may lawfully coerce them to provide information about imminent terrorist attacks. There is nothing illegal about enhanced interrogation. Now, one other thing, I mentioned Khalik Shade Mohammed. I want to talk about him just for a quick second. In March of 2003, the CIA captured him, KSM for short, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. When he was first taken into custody, he was defiant. He refused to provide any information, but after undergoing enhanced interrogation, including waterboarding, he became a veritable fount of information. He told the CIA about active al-Qaeda plots to launch attacks against the United States and other Western targets. He drew charts of al-Qaeda's operating structure, financing, communications, and logistics, revealed al-Qaeda travel routes and safe havens, identified voices and intercepted telephone calls, helped intelligence officers make sense of documents and computer records seized in terrorist raids, provided the names of many of his top operatives. In other words, waterboarding, it works. It's not illegal, and it is not torture. All right, well, let's go to the phones. Let's grab a call from Ron in Myerstown, Pennsylvania. Ron, Myerstown, Pennsylvania. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hi, Brian. I'm a huge fan. I do agree with most everything that you talked about on here. But I have one question. You just used the term bald-faced lie.
Yeah.
How are you spelling that first word? Is that B-A-L-D or B-O-L-D?
I am spelling it B-A-L-D. Do you think that's not a word?
I'd like to try to correct you. I think you actually mean bold-faced, like if you were typing something in bold-faced letters. But I'm sort of offended since I am bald. You know, when you say a bald-faced lie, I take that personally, sir. But no, I think it is supposed to be bold-faced, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, you got a lot of company here. Rob Gardner over here. He had an appointment with Mr. Gillette this morning for a shave, and he shares. He's as offended as you are, frankly, by this. So I apologize, Ron, both to you and to Rob. Hey, I'm looking here. Is it bald-faced or bold-faced?
I think you want bold. Yes. Just check with Rob. He'll tell you.
Well, here is the definition from Merriam-Webster of bald-faced. It means barefaced, a bald-faced lie. So this is a guy without a beard. So I guess it would be similar to bold, but a bald-faced lie is in Merriam-Webster. I'm sure bold-faced. Let's see what we get when we put bold-faced in there. See what we get. Bold-face, bold in manner or conduct, impudent, usually bold-face. So it could be a bold-faced, lie as well. All right, here's what we're going to do, Ron. I'm going to give you permission as the first officer of the Focal Point. You have my permission to use bold-faced in any and all circumstances, and I will reserve permission to use bald-faced in the same circumstances, and would ask your leave and permission and forgiveness in advance for offending you.
If Rob's okay with it, I am too.
All right.
Hey, Ron,
okay. Thanks.
You're just going to have to get a thick skin, Ron. That's all. You know, you listen to Brian, you got to get a little thick skin, you know. And
All right, Ron, listen, I appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Let's go to Sheila, San Angelo, Texas. Sheila, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hi, I love this show. Been a long-time listener. I've
Thank
learned
you.
a lot listening to you.
Thank you very much.
I just want to talk a bit with you about something I saw on livingwaters.com about Stephen Hawking. It's kind of interesting.
Okay, hit me.
He said he seemed like that I'm not among his believers. I believe that we all need to go live in space to get away from the problems that plague the human race. This is because we would take the problems with us. We are the problem. Wars, rape, hatred, greed, adultery, murder, abortion, and mass shootings wouldn't happen if human beings didn't exist. I just wanted to share his comments.
If human beings didn't exist. So how do you take that, Sheila? I mean, the whole comment sounds like it's actually got some wisdom in it. What do you make of it?
Well, I believe he's right. I mean, I believe if we were to go live on Mars or wherever, like you said, the Battlestar Galactica or whatever, we would take our problems.
Yeah, absolutely.
The wars. So I don't think that is a solution as Stephen Hawking said.
I agree.
That was my observation.
Okay, Sheila, and that has to do with theology because the Bible tells us that we are born in sin. David said, "In sin did my mother conceive me." At the moment of conception, we inherited a sinful nature from our parents. So we are carriers. Every single one of us is a carrier. It doesn't matter where you take us. We are carriers of the virus called sin, and every other human being is a carrier of the same virus. So getting away from here is no solution. We'll just replicate all of the sins and all of the criminal behavior in another colony just like we do here. All right, Sheila, thanks for the call. Very good. Let's go to Charles, Waco, Texas. Charles, welcome. What's on your mind?
Yes, I'd just like to make a couple of quick comments. First of all, I would like to first thank you for explaining part of the Geneva Convention, because a lot of people don't understand how it actually is over there whenever you don't know friend or foe. You don't know who's good or bad. As soon as they're through shooting at you, they can put the gun down, put on, and then just walk around as if nothing happened. So first, I'd just like to say thank you for explaining that part of it.
You're welcome.
The second thing is I'd like to ask your opinion on something, and that is the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. What gives them the right to redistrict Pennsylvania without legislation? And can legislation do, like, I forgot what president it was, Supreme Court came down with the decision, and the president said, went against that decision of the Supreme Court and more or less enforced the law.
Yeah. Well, you know, and Charles, the answer is there is no legal authority for the Pennsylvania Supreme Court to do what they did. There's no legal justification for it, no constitutional justification for it. They have no right to do it. So and I don't know why the Pennsylvania legislature went along with it. This is our problem, Charles, is we always capitulate. We always concede. We always submit when these courts overreach, when they issue these draconian dictatorial diktats. We capitulate. We give in. We don't seem to realize it. No, our elected officials, our representatives, they have constitutional authority from the Constitution to do something about these things, and they're not using it. So it's a frustration for all of us, Charles. I'm with you on that. All right, let's go to River in Lafayette, Louisiana. River in Lafayette, Louisiana. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hey, Brian. I listen to your show all the time.
Thank you.
Whenever I get off of work. I just wanted to make a comment earlier when you were talking about the Big Bang Theory.
Yes,
you
sir.
had made a comment about how it was an explosion, but actually the theory is that it's an expansion. The theory is that it's an expansion, and if it was an explosion has a center point. So it's like the idea that it's the universe is ever expanding.
Okay. But they believe it. They believe at the beginning that expansion was extremely rapid, or as the universe expanded at an incredible rate at the beginning. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So go ahead, River. You got another comment?
Yeah, and then this is just random, but I'm just thinking. But is it possible that the Big Bang Theory, like the starting of it, that God created but he started the expansion, and now that's why the universe is ever expanding, which would explain the ever expanding.
Yeah, and you may have a point there, and there are people that do try to reconcile the creation account with the Big Bang Theory. I'm not among them, but I appreciate the effort. But I guess the question here, River, what is it that expands in the Big Bang Theory? What is it that's expanding at such a rapid rate? What is it?
I'm not completely sure. I would
because
the universe.
Yeah, and see, my point would be that's exactly the same question. Just because you have a slightly different way people have of formulating it. Well, it's not an explosion; it's an expansion. Well, expansion of what? If it's not an explosion of something, but it's an expansion of something, well, what is it an expansion of? And where did that thing that's expanding so rapidly? Where did that thing come from? And I would suggest that evolution still does not have an answer to that question. All right, thank you for the call, River. Susie, I'm sorry, I'm just out of time. I wish I could take your call. I hope you will call back tomorrow. I would love to chat with you, love to take your call. Out of time to do it today. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for the program today. Do not forget to bow low before God, stand tall before man, stand in the gap where God has placed you, and never forget we are fighting a winnable war. God bless you. See you back here tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio. You can stay up to date with the latest in the culture war from the news team at onenewsnow.com. Our goal is to present the day's news from a biblical perspective. OneNewsNow.com not only features the latest breaking